Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our guests at City Hall. This is only the second meeting that we've had guests for a meeting with us again in over 2 years. So a little different, not used to it anymore. So we're going to call this afternoon's June 8th, 2022 meeting of the Planning Advisory Committee meeting to order. I would ask for a motion to adopt the amended.
Before the acknowledgement.
Yep.
Acknowledgement first.
Oh, sorry. Before I do that, I had it backwards. I'll read the land acknowledgement. The City of Kawartha Lakes respectfully acknowledges that we are situated on Mississauga lands and the traditional territory covered by the Williams Treaties. We are grateful for the opportunity to work here, and we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place. We also recognize the contributions of Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous peoples, both in shaping and strengthening this community and country as a whole. This recognition is connected to our collective commitment to make the promise and the challenge of truth and reconciliation real in our communities. Now I would ask for a motion to adopt the amended agenda. Wayne, is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor O'Reilly, any discussion? All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Is there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we'll move right into the public meeting reports. As required under the Planning Act, a public meeting is being held prior to the committee making any recommendations on these applications. Any recommendations from today will be forwarded to the June 21st council meeting. The purpose of this public hearing is to allow the committee to gather information on the applications before us, to hear those wishing to make oral submissions on the applications, and to allow the committee to ask questions of the applicants, interested parties, and staff. Everyone who makes a presentation at this meeting is requested to state your name for the public record. In the interest of time, the committee respectfully asks that you keep your presentation to no more than 5 minutes. When called, please unmute yourself and turn on your video. So we're going to move right into item 3.1, a canceled plan for Plan 2022-029. And I believe, Ian Walker, are you going to give us a quick synopsis of where we are and where we're going?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So notice was originally circulated 30 days in advance of this public meeting. However, more recently, just at the end of May, beginning of June, it was determined that there was a mapping error within our GIS mapping. We did not have all of the current lot fabrics for the new Ravines of Lindsay subdivision, which is of course on the southeast side of this property, on the south side of Jennings Creek. As such, we could not consider that this would fulfill the Planning Act requirement for providing the minimum 20-day notice to all assessed landowners within 120 meters of the property. Therefore, we had to send out a notice of cancellation, which went out on June 2nd. And of course, unfortunately, some people may or may not have received that on time, but we did have to send that out. And just wanted to let the committee members know that we have sent out a revised notification dated June 6th. So this Monday just passed, which will be circulated to all assessed landowners within 120 meters. And there will be signs posted on the property noting it will now be coming to the July 6th Planning Advisory Committee meeting as a public meeting. In addition to the rezoning for the Tribute Sales Establishment, which is a temporary use of 3 years. That will be the first of 3 applications by Tribute on the July 6th Planning Advisory Committee meeting. It will be followed by the larger subdivision official plan and zoning amendment applications for the Tribute North development, which is this is a second submission. It is a second public meeting for that one. The original public meeting was held in October of 2020, I believe, under the previous landowner, iBrands. And then following that will be the Tribute South development, which is also many of the local people area refer to here as the Orsi lands. Our former Orsi lands tribute has purchased that one. So it'll be the tribute rezoning application that was to be heard today, followed by the tribute north development and the tribute south development. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ian. Committee, any questions of Ian on that? Okay. We'll see. All right, if there's nothing further on that, we'll move right into 3.2. Oh, sorry. Yes, can we have a motion to receive the notice of cancellation? Mayor Latham, seconded by Jason Willock. Any discussion? All in favor? Carries. Thank you. 3.2, Plan 2022-034, an application to amend the Mariposa zoning bylaw 94-07 at 1401 Black School Road. Sherry Ray.
Thank you to the chair. Notice was given in accordance with the Planning Act to assess donors within 500 meters of the excuse me of the subject property, and the property was posted by the city's sign company. The Director of Development Services, as delegated by Council, approved consent application DO3-2021-003 on April 28th of this year. The application proposes to sever a farmhouse on approximately 1 hectare of land deemed surplus to the needs of the farming operation because of the consolidation of farmland with a non-abutting agricultural lot owned by the same farming operation. As a condition of provisional consent, the retained agricultural land is to be rezoned to prohibit future residential use and to prohibit the housing of livestock within the existing buildings on the property. In addition, the severed lot requires a rezoning to permit a lesser minimum lot frontage of 15 meters. And you can see next slide, please, John. You can see that the lot fabric has a very narrow driveway down to Black School Road. The report outlines the rezoning within the provincial and municipal context. The zoning bylaw review in the report identifies the amendments required to fulfill conditions of provisional consent. As a result of the circulation, no additional comments were received subsequent to the preparation of the report. So staff respectfully recommends that the draft zoning bylaw be referred to council for approval. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sherry. Committee, any questions of Sherry? Okay, seeing none. Does the applicant, owner, or agent on behalf of the applicant owner wish to speak to the application?
Hello,
Mr. Carroll?
Chairman. My name is Doug Carroll, and I'm representing the owner, Ray Tate. I'm available to answer any questions you have. The owner and I have no concerns with the report filed by Ms. Ray, and we agree with the recommendations and the analysis in the report. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Committee, any questions of Mr. Carroll at this point? Okay. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak to this application? Anyone from the public wishing to speak to the application? Calling for a third and final time. Anyone from the public wishing to speak to the application? Okay. At this point, we'll move to 3.2.2. Committee, what is your wishes? Mayor Latham?
I'll move that the report Plan 2022-034 amend the Mariposa zoning bylaw 9407 at 1401 Black School Road, Tate, be received. That a zoning bylaw respecting application D06-2022-006 substantially in the form attached as Appendix C to Report Plan 2022-034 be approved for adoption by Council, and that the Mayor and Clerk be authorized to execute any documents and agreements required by the approval of this application.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Wayne, any discussion? Calling the question, all in favor? That carries. Thank you. This public meeting being held under the Planning Act is now adjourned, and we will move into Section 4 of the agenda, Deputations. And we'll start with 4.1, Becky Fife.
Thank you. I am Becky Fife. I would like to quickly address a few points of confusion regarding this application. First, there's confusion regarding exactly what types and sizes of trailers would be allowed under the proposed bylaw amendment. The original application clearly states it's requesting the bylaw amendment for a recreational trailer sales establishment. It will be able to sell and store up to 32 trailers. The parking units, which are sized on the map, limit this to 10 large units with a parking unit size of 5 by 10 meters, and 22 small units with a parking unit size of 3.25 by 6 meters. Now, the Ontario government offers definitions of two classes of trailers. A recreational trailer is a trailer for camping and travel and includes facilities such as a kitchen, bathroom, and beds. A utility trailer is used to transport goods and materials, whether it contains a removable cover or no cover. So prior to the initial meeting regarding this proposal, Mr. Grass distributed a letter to our neighborhood, which stated that he wants to teach his son, Joe, how to run a successful small business, as he himself has been in the trailer business for over 30 years. He says, Joe will be selling enclosed trailers and utility trailers. He may also bring in a few travel trailers. At the previous meeting, Mr. Grass verbally mentioned the possibility of having a few horse trailers as well, which would be obviously a kind of utility trailer. The report contained in your agenda today under rationale proposal, which is page 36, states that trailer types offered for sale would include open and enclosed trailers as well as recreational trailers. On page 58, which is the textual amendment in the proposed bylaw, simply states that this would allow a trailer sales and storage establishment for a maximum of 32 trailers at a time. I'm confused as to why this is different and less restrictive than the original application, and why the trailer parking unit size limits have been removed. While this seems like semantics, a business selling up to 32 RVs is very different from a business selling some utility trailers. This would, for me, cause the traffic study to be another point of confusion. This traffic study mentions 2.5 to 5 cars per day added to the traffic on our road due to this business. This is significantly less than the traffic seen at the Great Canadian RV, which is about 3 kilometers away from the proposed site at the end of our road. While it makes sense that the smaller inventory of 32 trailers would draw fewer potential customers than the 55 units at Great Canadian RV, presumably a number of people will do comparison shopping. As such, it's hard to imagine the number being as low as published in the report. So again, I'm confused as to what the rationale for the 5 cars a day is based on. Regarding on-farm diversified use, it's supposed to be in place to help sustain a farming operation. So while the letter of the law, so to speak, of the on-farm diversified use document, the city official plan, and other relevant documents potentially accept the proposed use, the spirit of the law of these is clearly one of protection for our rural agricultural communities, and this application simply doesn't meet the spirit of the law in that regard. Now, prior to the first meeting, over 45 letters or phone calls were received in opposition. We have approximately 75 houses in this section of Cottingham and Orange Corners Road. That 45 people were willing to write letters and make phone calls sends a clear message that the majority of the neighbors are asking you, our elected representatives on council, to uphold the spirit of these documents and protect our rural agricultural community. Lastly, it's mentioned in the EcoView report, as well as in the letter that Mr. Grass sent to neighbors, that this is a temporary project, and that when it grows, the plan is to move to a more suitable highway location. So at the very least, if this rezoning is approved by council, it should be temporary rezoning and limited to 3 to 5 years maximum. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Any questions of the deputant? Again, I have a motion to receive the deputation. Councillor O'Reilly. Seconder, Councillor Seymour Fagan. Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. All right, 4.2, Darlene Callan.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Darlene Callan, and I also live on Cottingham Road. Today's reality is that Ontario farms are foreclosing at an astonishing rate, and the City of Kawartha Lakes is no exception. With the complications of climate change, rising equipment, fuel, seed, and all other farm costs, farmers typically come out in a deficit position. Deficits do not pay bills, and farming becomes unsustainable. This is the reality being addressed by the Ontario government in their attempt to put measures in place to allow farmers to stay in business, from which came the original intent of on-farm diversified use. In my discussion with staff, there seems to be a lot of emphasis placed on the fourth criteria for this classification, specifically the phrase, including but not limited to. Staff have told me that the government didn't provide clarity, that this statement makes it very difficult to determine what should be allowed and what should not. And there is pressure from farmers to diversify and from the province to let them. Every time I speak with OMAFRA, they tell me, you have to remember the intent of on-farm diversified uses, developed in response to farmers losing their farms. Refer to page 17 of permitted uses. I've been told over and over by OMAFRA that not limited to is there for a reason, to give municipalities the opportunity to determine what they will allow, not to take away their ability to control what qualifies. They can be more restrictive if they want, but not more permissive. First and foremost, the PPS priority, and I quote, is that all types, sizes, and intensities of agricultural uses and normal farm practices shall be promoted and protected in prime agricultural areas. The city has declared Cottingham Road an active farming area with signs at both ends of the road. It is zoned prime agricultural, and there's an obligation outlined by the province to protect the operations of the farmers who farm there. The official plan states that retail ventures should be placed together and not scattered along rural roadways. The PPS in section 2.3.3.1 says that criteria for these uses may be based on the guidelines developed by the province or municipal approaches which achieve the same objectives. Municipal approaches should have public input. Staff initially did not lend their support to this for good reason, but now we have an agricultural impact statement and a traffic study that have led to their support, all based entirely on 2.5 customers per day. How will he control this when 30 customers from Great Canadian RV 3 kilometers down the road drop into comparison shop? What is the recourse of the community when this happens? First and foremost, this application does not comply with the intent. Mr. Grass clearly states in a letter to neighbors that he is doing this to teach his son the ins and outs of a small business, and I quote, when it grows, his plan is to move this to a more suitable highway location. As Becky said, does this not describe a temporary request? In discussion with other planners across the province, I'm told that an option would be a temporary use versus a general amendment. There are too many unknowns. How many customers, how many staff, and how much traffic really? And just not residents concerned about their safety, but farmers for which this whole on-farm diversified was intended to promote and support. Apparently, temporary bylaw and temporary amendment wording could reflect a time frame. For example, expires on October 31st, 2024, which allows 2 years to build the business and relocate it. The wording would be specific and address the concerns expressed by the community, stipulating the conditions that would trigger termination of the temporary zoning and relocation to, as Mr. Grass puts it, a more suitable highway location. This doesn't alleviate any of the concerns, but at least it offers a safety net. Another unknown is the popularity of the Kawartha Trans-Canada Trail, which bisects the driveway of this property and the proximity of its most popular destination, the Trestle Bridge. Currently, this is bringing in 20 to 50 cars a day, up to 100 on weekends and nice weather, and it is only likely to grow with the booming adjacent housing developments in both Lindsay and Peterborough. Agricultural economic development should be all over this, as it's a beautiful fit with the goals of the Kawartha Lakes Agriculture and Food Action Plan. We should be fixing the road, expanding the shoulders for parking off the road, providing signage to direct people to safe parking, and maintaining the rural landscape to encourage this appeal to our community. In response to the growth plan, this has far more potential to diversify the rural economy with support of local farm stands, bakeries, villages, etc. A retail trailer sales is actually a competing and opposing interest with the agritourism potential of the rail trail, as well as an increased safety risk as numbers to the trail multiply. I spoke with Ernie Hardeman about this when he was still Minister of Agriculture, and he was surprised at the consideration of this with 64 driveways in less than 3 kilometers. He said that a good question for council would be, how would you put this in a subdivision? And suggested I compare road widths. Non-thoroughfare streets in a subdivision are 28 feet, curb to curb, and there are sidewalks on which to walk. Cottingham Road is 22 feet, grass to grass. No shoulders, no sidewalks, but we expect trailers to pass tractors and still keep people safe who have no place to walk but on the road. He said that a condition could be applied to approval that would hold the applicant responsible for widening of the road and installation of shoulders in a similar fashion to what MTO requires. With all of the unanswered questions, we request that this application be denied. Any approval should only be temporary or with conditions for upgrading the road to ensure safety. The significant traffic from the rail trail is already having an impact on farm safety and farm operation in the area, and the city has done nothing to improve the safety of the residents or the farmers. It would be highly irresponsible to add to this with any number of additional large vehicles on this narrow road. It only takes one. Thank you.
Thanks, Darlene. Just hang on there for a minute in case is there any questions of the deputant? Okay, thanks, Darlene. Can I have a motion to receive the deputation? Councillor Seymour Fagan, seconded by Wayne Brumwell. All in favor? Carries. Thank you. 4.3, Nancy Page. I apologize if I mispronounce names.
You got it right. There's no R in it. Good afternoon. I'd like to address farm and resident safety for an official plan and rezoning proposal that is not related to farming or agricultural uses and is just opening up the interpretation and setting a bad precedent for future considerations in agricultural and residential areas. Traffic concerns expressed by residents are bigger than just the number of cars. EchoView notes that the proposal would generate approximately 2.5 customer trips per day with an additional 2 to 4 trips both ways for parts and deliveries, with return trips a minimum of 13 per day. The traffic study revealed an average daily volume of 300 trips on Cottingham Road. Given that there are 64 residences between this proposed site and the highway, 2 vehicles leaving each home once per day would account for 86% of those trips. These local residents know how to watch for farm machinery and neighbors and children walking, jogging, biking on the road. Remember those 64 residences have no sidewalks, so must walk on the road as there are no shoulders. The type of traffic proposed here is very different, as there would be vehicles towing trailers. This has a far different impact on the ability of farm vehicles to navigate safely. It appears that both the traffic study and the traffic criteria of the agricultural impact assessment have been based on 13 trips per day. How realistic is that? And how do you run a business with just 2.5 customers per day? The heavier season for RV sales and repairs, is also in the warmer weather when farmers are on the road and children are more likely to be on the road. Unfamiliar drivers also drive at highway speeds, another concern of both residents and farmers. Our concerns: predicted number of trips do not make sense. Vehicles are large and the road is narrow. What happens when vehicles towing trailers meet the farm equipment, example, a combine at the top of the hill? There is no room to pass and no shoulders to pull over. Did the traffic study take into account the size of the traffic and not just the number of vehicles? Did they note the number of hills? Close calls on these hills are already plentiful with regular-sized vehicles. And we were surprised to note in the staff report that the City Development Engineering Division had no concerns when the city has received numerous ongoing complaints and a petition in regard to the condition of Cottingham Road. The entrance to the subject property off of Cottingham Road also crosses the Trans-Canada Trail, which is a highly used attraction for walking, bicycling, and snowmobiling in this area, and where many people park on the side of the road to access the trail. Existing research on agricultural equipment on public roads confirms that we have seen on Cottingham Road in the past 10 years. Single-family farms are now almost non-existent, and farmers require more land in order to justify the increasing cost of equipment, farm fuel, and supplies. To improve their chance of survival, they are renting land from non-farmers who now own it. This means more travel on roads to access these farmlands, resulting in an increased mix of farm equipment with faster-moving motor vehicles. And this has fueled extensive research on accidents with farm vehicles, and results that indicate crash fatality rates on rural roads are almost double the rate of urban roads. Rural crashes are more frequent, more severe, and more likely to result in death, and the farm vehicle occupant was killed nearly twice as often as occupants of the other vehicle. And all of this without the added risk of the other vehicles towing trailers. In the provincial document Guidelines on Permitted Uses in Ontario's Prime Agricultural Areas, there are 20 references to traffic and the need to mitigate increased traffic and safety risks for slow-moving farm equipment operators and people passing in vehicles. Specifically recommended are wide shoulders, reduced speed limits to safely accommodate large equipment, and controlling traffic access to these areas. These challenges have also been addressed in the Kawartha Lakes Agriculture and Food Action Plan under infrastructure challenges such as road maintenance, road width, and road safety. Cottingham Road has been recognized through signage by the city as an active farming community. Other than these signs at the ends of the road, nothing has been done to protect the safety of farmers, and despite this, it appears you are considering adding more commercial traffic into, or adding commercial traffic into an agricultural area. Is it any wonder that farmers don't feel that they get the support? Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the deputant at this point? Wayne, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Nancy, how many kilometers of road are we talking about here?
Three, yeah.
3 kilometers?
3 kilometers. Well, that's going from number 7 highway.
Number 7
to,
down.
yeah,
yes,
like there's other side road access.
Yes, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you, Nancy. Can I get a motion to receive the deputation? Jason Willick, seconded by Wayne Brumwell. All in favor? Carries. Thank you. 4.4, David Windrum.
Good day, everyone. I'm David Windrum. I farm directly across the road from the said property. We background cattle. We've been there for over 80 years. I'm not at all in favor of this zoning. The gentleman that lived on Mr. Grassie's place beforehand made his living full-time farming. He was in his 80s when he passed away, and the land was not fertilized near the end. It was pastured and cropped. Mr. Grassie knew this when he bought the place. Since then, he has got a few beehives and taps a few trees, and another neighbor cuts the grass, the hay off it. He's in the process now of rezoning it into trailer sales. You folks have got the letters, same as I have. Some of us are 3rd and 4th generations on that Cottingham. He's been there a very few years. Everybody objects to it. I can't understand why there's such a problem turning this down. There's, as far as the agriculture end of it goes, it's as good a land as what I own, or the Doug Howden's to the west, or Randy Story's to the east. It's not second cut farmland. It was ranched with cattle before, and not. Why we have to turn it into commercial, and what will it bring in the future? He says there's going to be 2 or 3 cars in there per day. What business can operate on 2 or 3 people per day? It can't. So if it folds, when this has been rezoned commercial, what do we get? What do we have to live with? Right now, there is no respect or consideration from the property that people are there now. There's a rifle range there, and there's nothing for on Saturday afternoon or Sunday afternoon. When we're having our quiet time with the barbecue, we'll hear gunshots. So I gotta go and check cattle in case they've stampeded through the fences. We bring them down from Alberta. We don't have a half a dozen head running around. It's a serious problem. Along with that is the housing that we're talking about on Cottingham. An awful lot of the people have respect for us. It's the ones that are cutting through that are the high speeders, and they don't realize that when you pop over the hill, we're sitting there, and it wouldn't be the first one we've collided with. And when these people come, they bring dogs and everything else, and it wouldn't be the first dog that I've shot, but chasing the cattle. And it all, I'm just so frustrated with this, it's unbelievable. It should not go through. This should not go through. If he wants to be and he thinks he's a farmer, then let him expand his bees and his maple syrup business. I rent farm also, I rent land. Guys live in Toronto. The land that I work is working land, the fence bottoms and around the buildings and any rough land. It grows up in buckthorn, burdock, bull thistles, apple trees, just garbage. I see no attempt to handle this problem either. So meanwhile, all these stuff grows up and it all goes to seed, where does it go? It goes over on our property. I cut the grass and I sprayed. If you're along there, I own almost 2 miles of road frontage on Orange Corners Road and Cottingham Road. Anybody who's been down there, they know that I cut the grass and I cut the brush on my side and the township side. This is a problem. I don't do it on my rented land. Who's going to take care of this wasteland? And when we get our trailer park and our trailer place in there, why do we care anymore? And we see this so often. When the people come in and they buy these farms and all they want is the houses, and construction guys are as bad. All they want is the freedom, and they hide under agriculture. Let's hide under agriculture. Well, I think it's time we stepped up and said, we need agriculture. He knew it was when he bought it. Built a great big house in the middle of it, beautiful great big house. And then he put up a agricultural building with no agriculture equipment to put in it. So where are we going to put in it now? Trailers? I don't know. Like, writing's on the wall, and nobody seems to be reading it or seeing it with agriculture. And as farmers, we're getting fed up with it. We're being bulldozed over by these guys. And this is what's happened again here now. He's bulldozing over. And somebody needs to stand up and say, no, enough's enough. And what I'm concerned about is when it doesn't make it with 2 or 3 customers a day and it folds, what do we get then? Because once you get your commercial, you got it. And I know that, for we'd had commercial on one of our farms, and once we got it, we had the world by the tail. You do what you want.
Thanks, Mr. Windrum.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Is there any questions for Mr. Windrum? Okay. Thanks, Mr. Windrum. Can I get a motion to receive the deputation? Councillor Seymour Fagan, seconded by Jason Willick. All in favor? Thank you. 4.5, Douglas Howden.
Hello, my name is Doug Howden, and I own 47 acres abutting the west side of 689 Cottingham Road. It's not raining today. I would rather be at home doing my farming obligations, but I strongly believe this type of zoning application should not be approved in this rural location. Our property is actively farmed in conjunction with our home farm on Meadowview Road, 1 mile south of Cottingham. I'm very proud to say I have lived there and farmed there my whole life, 4th generation actually. We obviously have to travel on the roads with machinery, and even now before this retail proposal, with the volume and inconsiderate drivers, it means being very stressful and at times unsafe on our narrow roads. Added traffic to and from this retail outlet will only add to this. I have concerns about the number of people who potentially will be at this location. Many people will bring their dogs and their children for a nice drive in the lovely rural countryside. If we happen to have cattle on our property and a customer dog breaks loose and chases the cattle, causing injury, or they run and break through a fence onto a road potentially, who's responsible? What if customers or children are trying to pet the cattle and they get injured? Who's responsible? If the cattle broke the fence at night and possibly damaged 32 aluminum trailers, who pays for that? Can I be sued? This is rural Ontario. With a single residential house next to our property, the odds of things happening like this would be very less. Our property does not have a green number to reference it to, as there are currently no buildings on the property. Because of environmental setbacks, a home would only be able to be built within the sight lines directly to the west of the proposed trailer parking. I am absolutely sure that because of this, rezoning as a trailer site or any other retail activities that might occur in the future, it will greatly reduce the value of my rural property. The natural beauty and quietness will be gone. Not that many years ago, severances were being approved everywhere. Obviously, the government and the municipalities realize now that was poor planning. I cannot understand how we can even consider allowing non-agricultural retail sales on our rural side roads when development is being mandated to settlement areas. Now they have to drive on our rural roads to go shopping. It seems counterproductive. I think we all have seen examples of where farms are being purchased and then being used legally or illegally for other purposes than it was intended for. It seems to be a much cheaper alternative than doing the right thing and purchasing proper commercial property. I believe that this is a guise on farm diversification. I believe that this guise on farm diversification is another example of taking advantage of our precious farmland. I strongly oppose this application for myself and the citizens of our community. And as an added note, there is an agricultural building on the property, and to my understanding, it is now going to be used as a retail sales office. I don't understand the logic in that or how that can even be passed. And I think it's just another loophole that is being used to cut down on costs rather than building in a proper commercial area and abiding by commercial rules. So anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Howden. Any questions for the deputant? Okay, seeing none, can I have a motion to receive the deputation? Councillor O'Reilly, seconded by Jason Willock. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. 4.6, Kent Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, committee, and those who are listening. Happy to be back, by the way. It's been a while, maybe over 2 years. My name is Kent Randall. I'm principal planner at EcoView Consulting. I'm the agent for Mr. Ed Grass, who is with me here today, and he's going to say a few words after me. Of course, Ed, the landowner and the applicant for this official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment. So firstly, I just want to thank staff for the work behind the scenes in terms of going back and forth and ensuring that we had a comprehensive submission to take back to you. I think what you have before you is, properly articulates what Mr. Grass is looking to do on the site. And when we initially had our public meeting last year, it was quite a while ago, I had mentioned something about it being akin to a slightly larger home occupation. I stand by that characterization. I think it's a good characterization, especially in light of a lot of the comments that we're hearing about scale. Because when it comes to an on-farm diversified use, scale is important. There are a number of criteria, and that was mentioned by one of the deputants. There are a number of criteria that an on-farm diversified use has to comply with, one of which is scale. And scale really drives, the usage, the impact, traffic, things like that. All that's related back to scale. So what Mr. Grass is proposing, as noted in the report and as has been alluded to, is an RV sales establishment. It would be no greater than just over half an acre, okay, in terms of the space that it would occupy. And most of that space is reserved for the storage of his trailer inventory, okay? So up to 32 trailers is what he's permitted under the zoning bylaw that's before you, the amendment. And that's the restriction of the scale. It's written in the zoning bylaw. It can't get any bigger than that. He can't use any more space than that. In terms of the office is a small portion of that agricultural building. He needs to use the agricultural building to do his agriculture on the balance of the property. And as has been described and has been noted, and this is absolutely true, Mr. Grass is looking for an opportunity to provide his son with some direction in terms of sales and that sort of thing. So they want to operate this business together on the site, and it's of a small enough scale that it makes sense as an on-farm diversified use. And I don't typically try to tout my credentials, but I will say this, that I have a lot of experience with on-farm diversified uses. I've developed policies in other municipalities, provisions in zoning bylaws. I've spoken many times with OMAFRA. I know Publication 851 inside and out, and certainly this is an on-farm diversified use. And I would also point out that, of course, the staff report, your professional planners as well agree with that assessment. As I had said, the scale is important here, right? An on-farm diversified use can essentially be anything. It doesn't have to be related to agriculture. It can be anything, provided it meets those criteria. And that includes scale. That includes being compatible with the agricultural, with the surrounding community, with the character of the area, and being small in terms of temporal and scale, as I had said. The big thing is that the provinces place limits or guidelines in the guidelines. They place limits in terms of how large these on-farm diversified uses can be, and typically they're no greater than 2% of the total area of the property, or up to 1 hectare. Mr. Grass is well below that. So when we're talking about scale in terms of what is contemplated by the province, it's much smaller than what is contemplated. We have heard quite a few comments from, we've of course heard the deputations today. And in terms of traffic, I just want to point out that traffic study, which was completed by Tramplan, was peer reviewed by a third party, by another consultant. And with the conclusions being that the conclusions of that particular VAR study were valid. 2.5, and it's been mentioned, 2.5 to 5 trips per day. That's it. It's negligible. And the reason for that, again, is back to scale. We're not talking about Great Canadian RV. Great Canadian RV at my last check has 110 trailers parked outside. This is 32 we're talking about here. It's a small scale business. It's what the OFDU guidelines were intended to allow for. And in terms of Mr. Grass's credentials or bona fides as a farmer, he has those credentials. We've produced those to the city. And Mr. Grass will explain what he's done and the investment that he's put into the property. I think there was a comment about how the property had not been fertilized and hadn't been farmed. Mr. Grass is putting that money back into the property. So we're talking about continued agricultural use on the property. And then in terms of the long-term plans for the property, it doesn't impede any future agricultural use of the property. We're not rezoning to commercial. It's an agricultural exception zone. It permits this specific secondary use as an on-farm diversified use. Agriculture is still permitted. It's going to be permitted well into the future. And in terms of the space that this is occupying, we're occupying the grass or the area that's been used for hay. Again, less than half an acre. Those trailers can be moved off in the future if the use ceases to exist. So it can be farmed well in the future with no impact to the farming into the future. So I'll just close by saying that we do strongly agree with the report that's been provided to you, with the recommendations from your planning staff, that this go to council for approval, adoption and approval, both the OPA and ZBA. And as I said, it's the ideal on-farm diversified use as far as I'm concerned, and that is my professional opinion. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Grass to provide.
We're up on time, Kent.
Okay, how much time do we have?
No, you're done.
Oh, I'm done.
Yeah, you're done.
So he can't speak?
Yeah, no, sorry.
Okay.
You used up the whole, and then some.
Okay, sorry about that.
Is there any questions for Kent
I'll
from
take
committee? Councillor Seymour Fagan?
Thank you, through you to Kent. So you mentioned that the trailer sales are compatible with farming. Can you please explain how retail trailer sales are compatible with agriculture use and farming?
Through the chair, so they're compatible in the sense that where he is storing the trailers themselves will be, we do have to go through site plan approval, so there will be visual buffering that will be provided, whether through fencing or hedges or that sort of thing. But certainly in terms of its scale, it's of a small enough scale that it shouldn't impact adjacent farming operations. It certainly won't impact adjacent farming operations. It's also going to be located over the hill where it won't be seen from the road. So as far as we're concerned, that meets the character of the area.
But that still doesn't say it's compatible, really.
No, I would, through the chair, I would say that means that it's compatible, in my opinion.
Okay. The other thing, the traffic study, did it take into account that the Great Canadian Trailer is right around the corner from there?
Through the chair, it would take into account traffic counts from Highway 7.
Okay, so it didn't include competing or similar businesses, because I know with business, if you've got one in this corner, you've got one over there, they're going to go back and forth, so the traffic will be increased. So if it didn't take into account that there's something very similar around the corner.
Through the chair, it takes into account traffic counts on Highway 7.
Is there any further questions for Mr. Randall at this point? Okay, seeing none, can I have a motion to receive the deputation? Councillor O'Reilly, seconded by Jason Willock. All in favor? Carries. Thank you. 4.7, David Marsh.
Bring my little package of bits and pieces. I gotta address this on a few points, if I may. And before my 5 minutes starts, I have one. Well, I'll fit that in. First of all, Mr. Chair and to the committee, I'd like to thank the previous deputations, because, in fact, this is an agricultural property we're trying to build an education center and a church in the middle of. And the same thing, how is that compatible with any of the uses of agriculture? So, and it's the same planning firm. So as far as the diversification goes, there is no diversification. Most importantly, I think it should be brought to your attention, and I'm assuming you received your packages about a week ago. We're looking at 6 years of reports. Okay, 6 years of reports. There's reference to 2016, then it flips to 2020, then it goes to 2022. I got notice on June the 2nd that there was going to be a meeting. June the 3rd, I requested a copy of the planning report, which was Friday. Monday, June 6th, I received a report, and then I requested, because the addendums and all the information wasn't available, I requested that on June the 6th. On June the 7th, I left a voicemail saying I still hadn't received anything. At 7 p.m. on June the 7th, through talking to various people, I found out that, in fact, someone had some of the addendums and had the information. On June the 8th, at 10:59 a.m., which is today, I received a reply from the city saying, you have to tell us which addendums you want, and we'll get them to you. And I'm supposed to be here at 1. So I like to come prepared. You're going to see me all over the place because I'm not prepared, because the information wasn't available to us. This is an ongoing application. This is ridiculous. The other thing that's not clear, and it's very, very important, and if I may ask one question of staff or someone, is regarding this application of this temple, Bylaw 8706 and the official plan amendment. It's not clear who is to pay for the road, for the improvements. Can something like it's a vital point, and nowhere in the report. So perhaps staff, through your deliberations, can ask that. But again, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity. All of this is just, like I said, it's all over the place. The reports I've seen on this application, and a lot of you weren't even here when this first came to the public meeting. There should be another public meeting. They've amended their application. They sent it in. All of a sudden, there's great urgency. They've owned the property since 2013, and since 2016, this has been going back and forth. And the public, who are affected the most, get less than 24 hours notice to have the information available to them. It's just not acceptable. So there should be a public meeting. They've changed their application. Yes, they had a public meeting they had an open house, which was great. That's the last we heard of them. Had an open house. 10 months later, they sent us a little report saying these were your concerns, but no one attempted to tell us how they were going to be addressed. The biggest issue at hand, again, is whether or not this is going to impact people, whether it's what it's made out to be. By the way, there's over 100 pages in addendums alone, so I haven't been able to review them all. But I can certainly tell you that this application, if you go to your report, one of the biggest things is there's no financial impact to the city of Kawartha Lakes. You've got bylaw enforcement, because there will be bylaw enforcement. Upgrade in the level of service. We're now going to have to plow beyond, and we're going to have to plow the roads and sand and make sure that the dust control is in place on a regular basis, because this is going to be a public, they said it's not going to be public, but it's a temple, it's a church, it's a meditation center. There will be steady traffic. The improvements will be required. The road does currently, and if any of you have looked at this, I'm sure you haven't had time either to look at this, you'll see that the road is not even close to municipal standards. This road travels, it's a corduroy road that goes through a very significant wetland. There's suggestion there that, well, we can just make do with it. If you're going to build a 5,000 square foot education center, most of that's going to be concrete. You're going to build a 3,000 square foot temple. There's going to be a lot of heavy equipment, and it's going to go over a corduroy road. And yet the city says, no, that's okay. We're going to put a hold on this, and the hold we can negotiate. That's not how it works. That's letting the horse out of the barn. You've got to make it very clear that these people are responsible for improving that road, if in fact if you're going to support it to any degree, and there should be a letter of credit in place, because they're going to get ahead of you, way ahead of you, and you're going to say, we'll deal with the road later. That doesn't work. In fact, the city tried to do work on this road last year, and the Kawartha Region Conservation Authority stepped in and shut them down and said, you can't do it. It's a significant wetland. It's a single-lane corduroy road. So you've got that. I've heard now, and this is another thing that possibly you could do, is you can control the number of people that go in there. Right now, it's a nice, quiet little temple. And they're going to do meditation. There's never going to be more than 30 people, but they got 30 rooms they're going to put in there. Okay? So there is going to be more than 30 people. And what happens if they sell it? The zoning allows for an education center. That's a school. Education center. You're going to have another meet a wee. They had 3,000 kids sometimes. There's no restrictions on that. It's not acceptable.
Can I get you to conclude, Dave? Your 5 minutes is up.
That's a quick 5 minutes. So I'm going to ask three options of you. I could ask for an extension. Can I ask for an extension? Well, given the fact that I've been given, like I said, 24 hours to review everything, I would request formally, through you, Mr. Chair, an extension of or give me 5 minutes or 3 minutes, whatever you'll give me.
2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay. So through the report, quickly, the planners, their own report says the road is not up to standards. If you read through the reports, it says it's not up to standards. The other option you have, and that's the whole thing, is you've got options available to you, and basically we're trying to put a round peg into a square hole. One is you can send this back. You can send it back to the planning. They should have another public meeting. You can defer your decision of dealing with this so that people like myself have time to actually review this and do a proper presentation, or you can deny it. Or you can say a condition is the road must be improved and a letter of credit put in place to do so, and the number of people you can put restrictions. There's all kinds of ability. I ask that you've heard briefly from me. This thing is a dog's breakfast for sure, and I'd ask that it be denied. If it can't be denied, I think it should be at least sent back and deferred, that the public has proper opportunity to speak to it.
Thanks, Dave. Any questions for Dave at this point? Seeing none, can I have a motion to receive the deputation? Wayne Brumwell, seconder. Mayor Latham, all in favor? Carries. Thank you. 4.8, Beverly Saunders.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes, okay. I'm going to time myself so I give the landowner a chance to speak as well. Oh, she's there. Hi, Diane. So I'll try to be as brief as possible. This application has been long-standing, as David has alluded to. I was submitted in 2016, went to public meeting in that fall, went to another public meeting 2 years later, primarily to address public comments. And then, as he spoke to, a few years more to get to this stage. We've done a series of studies, addendums to the studies, 2 public meetings, 2 responses to public comments, a public open house, which was hosted at the site, a responding summary of concerns and detailed response to those concerns, which included providing details on how we were addressing each and every one of the concerns provided by the public. This included what has been included in the staff report, including a holding provision for addressing upgrades to the road. The key issue here is that Riwashe Society is a nonprofit organization and requires some flexibility as to the phasing of road upgrades depending on the amount of people that will be attending the site. The only change to the proposal that has happened since the original public meeting is just the staging of phasing and then the added inclusions of the holding provisions that Richard has put in place. We feel there has been adequate public consultation on this application and have moved forward with extensive efforts to address those public comments. We would ask that Riwashe Society be granted the opportunity to begin detailed design, continue with a site plan application so that we can answer some of these questions which are really intended and specific to site plan and detailed design elements. Now, the questions regarding occupancy, that is being controlled through the zoning through the number of rooms provided within the overall build-out. As I said, there's phasing, so there would be smaller amounts for phase 1 and then extended as phase 2 and phase 3 are proposed. I will say that I feel Riochet Society has done extensive efforts at significant expense to themselves to get to this point. We are grateful for the report that has been provided by staff, which recommends approval, and I am here to answer any questions that you have. I will also just leave it to Diane to speak as well, but I want to give her that opportunity since it has been a long time getting here.
Hi, everyone. My name's Diane Costa. I'm one of the board members at Riochet and a longtime member. Don't have much to say. I'm just more here support Beverly, and if there's any questions, just to those who may not know, I mean, we chose this property because of the beautiful landscape it has, and our intent for the property has always been the same and hasn't changed, that has always been intended that we create and maintain a space that allows for retreatants to have a quiet place for contemplation, meditation, and practice. That's always been our primary focus, and that is still our intention to today. So that's all I wanted to say, and I'm here if there's any questions.
And I will just add very quickly, we had requested slight amendments to the bylaw that had been provided by staff. Specifically, there is a statement or references to gross floor area within the bylaw, and it doesn't acknowledge the fact that there were always contemplated 2 stories, and so we had asked that that be amended to address that. That said, if council is not, or if planning committee is not comfortable with that, then we are fine just moving forward with the bylaw that exists now, and then we will propose a minor variance when those phases are proposed. The other amendment that we had requested was there's a statement regarding outdoor uses, specifically that they're prohibited on the site. Our concern with that is that the outdoor uses were always contemplated as a part of the retreat-based use, specifically forest bathing, outdoor yoga class. However, that could potentially be interpreted as not being allowed under the existing bylaw that's been drafted, and so we would just ask for clarification. And we did provide a draft bylaw as an attachment to our delegation with the proposed changes for your consideration. And then I did just very briefly, even though I know I have 3 seconds, just mention that occupancy is not only addressed through the rooms in the bylaw, but also because the membership has to register for each event. So this isn't a scenario where people can just drive to the site and show up. This is one where there's a gate, they register for the event has a maximum occupancy, and then it proceeds forward. And so these speculations of hundreds of people is just not accurate to the site. And I'll leave it to questions for you.
Thanks. Councillor Seymour Fagan.
Thank you. Through you to Beverly. Beverly, I have a question. So you just brought forward all these amendments when this project's been ongoing for years. So I'm wondering why now you're asking for bylaw amendments when they're already written up. And you said yourself that you've been contemplating all of these for years. So why just now, when we've got the report in front of us, have you asked for amendments at the 11th hour?
So this last bylaw that was drafted by staff was only provided to me last week. And so when I reviewed it, I saw that the discrepancy was there and requested the bylaw be amended.
Had you been clear the entire time that this is what you were looking for?
Yes.
Okay. And in regards to the occupancy, you say 30? If that's the occupancy?
I believe the total occupancy at most is 40. That includes staff. But at any single event, they're looking for 25 to 30 people.
Okay, great. And that is for the rooms, right? Or is that for the entire property?
For an entire event, it would be 40 people, including staff.
Okay, thank you. And can there be more than one event going on at the property at once? Because I've been to many retreats, and there's many different things going on sometimes, and you know, it might be 30 in one event, and then you've got another 30 in another.
No, so the occupancy is based on the detailed design, including septic systems, water supplies would be based on 40 people. Yeah, no problem.
Any further questions from committee? Councillor O'Reilly.
Yeah, you mentioned that there were some changes. You alluded to the fact you felt as though they were minor changes and wouldn't warrant another public meeting.
That's correct.
Is that your position, or what do you consider minor?
When you say the changes that I proposed in the bylaw, is that what you're saying? Yeah. So the reason I say they're minor is because the second floor was always contemplated. We posted that within the public notice, or sorry, within our public meeting. We included 2 floors there. So I don't think it should be a surprise to anyone that there was always a proposal for 2 floors and a building envelope of what is stated in the bylaw. That said, we recognize that there may have been a discrepancy in the notice provided to staff, from staff to the public. And so what we've said is if we're uncomfortable with those amendments, i.e. the second floor, then that's fine. We'll stay with what was in the notice that was provided in 2019, move forward with a minor variance if and when it's proposed, kind of thing. And then that way more public engagement will happen if we need to do a second floor in the future. No problem.
Jason, go ahead.
Question through you, Chair, to Beverly. There's 3 holding provisions on this. And it appears like everyone is based on servicing, road upgrades, and site plan.
Yeah.
Is that a good summary of what the 3 holding symbols are?
Yeah, so staff can probably speak to this as well. So when they go into their report, I'm sure they'll speak to it, but it was primarily road conditions, recognizing that a site plan doesn't necessarily address off-site works, so you have to address upgrades to the roads through the holding provision. Servicing is specific to just because we proposed the 3 phases, they're asking us for detailed design of what those 3 phases would look like in terms of servicing, i.e. when we're upgrading the septic system, when we're going to, where the different septic systems are going to be, that kind of thing. And so it's my understanding that Public Works wants to see the full build out and what that's going to look like before they approve phase 1, which would simply be the existing buildings on the site being used for the retreat use. And then the third is site plan, exactly, which requires obviously detailed design in order to proceed.
Wayne, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Beverly. If the Conservation Authority will not allow changes to the road, does that kill the project?
So I don't know the context of that. Like typically, so I used to work for Kawartha Conservation. There's typically not a time that they prevent works on a road. Typically they have permitting that has to happen. Typically they have environmental assessments that need to occur, but typically their permitting policies allow for works to maintain existing infrastructure. So I don't know the details of what Mr. Marsh spoke to, but I don't foresee that being an issue for this, but we haven't done a detailed design of that road. All to say, I used to work for them. I worked in their permitting department. It's standard practice to have to get a permit for works that go through wetlands, particularly for infrastructure. So I imagine it's more a matter of getting appropriate permits.
I think we need some sort of confirmation from the Conservation Authority to guide us into what decision we make.
I mean, our concern is the works that he's talking about are not on this site. It's on a municipally maintained road of which the municipality is, I'm assuming, maintaining and needed to get appropriate permits for. I don't see how that would reflect upon this particular site, which is a fair amount distance down the road. Yeah.
So this is not the access to the site, it's the road?
It is not, no. I mean, it is the access road to the site. Sorry, my apologies. Yes, so it is the access to the road. I don't know the details of what Mr. Marsh is speaking to. He's not been provided to me. But I don't see how that could possibly affect the application.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any further questions? Okay. Thank you, Beverly.
Thank you.
Can I get a motion to receive the deputation? Councillor Seymour Fagan, seconded by Wayne Brumwell. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Go ahead, Mayor Latham.
If I may, just, we allowed a couple extra minutes for Mr. Marsh. I wonder if the committee would indulge a couple minutes for Mr. Grass, just to hear. I wouldn't mind just hearing his quick comments, if the committee's okay with that, just so we've got a round on everything. I leave it up to you.
It looks like the committee agrees, so we'll give Mr. Grass a couple of minutes.
Is mic on? We purchased the land that we're occupying right now 5 years ago, and we learned that nothing had been done to improve the land or diversify the farm for generations. It was used primarily for grazing as a ranch. The costs to turn this farm into a sustainable operation to serve and support the agricultural community were staggering, and certainly made us think about whether or not it was worth the investment required. One of the reasons we want to utilize the on-farm diversified use program is to return some of the new venture's earnings to the farm and to turn the farm into a viable growing operation. As a farm, we've already developed an apiary where this year we will produce 300 pounds of honey, a maple syrup operation which bottled 500 liters of maple syrup this spring. And we've invested significantly in tile draining and preparing the acreage for new hay. We've been challenged with statements that we're not a farm. We've heard some today. In fact, we have invested over $450,000, not including the cost of the land, to purchase on this farm in just these last 5 years. This investment to improve the yields and agricultural revenues for this farm certainly will not turn a profit for us in a reasonable time frame, but we're committed to improving our agricultural footprint and improving the land for now and for future generations. To give you insight into how poor the land was when we took ownership, I'm told the work we're doing this year to the fields will improve our hay yield from 330 bales last year to 2,100 bales next year. We intend to start up a small business in an area of my expertise of 35 years in an effort to teach my son how to operate a small business. I've helped innumerable dealerships get their starts and grow successfully from their home and farm properties across Ontario and Canada the last 35 years. And now it's time to do the same for my son here in the city of Court Lakes. By doing so at our farm, it makes the venture more likely to succeed as we live on the property, and the inventory will thereby be more secure. And my son will not have to suffer significant costs in his developmental years with high lease, security, and off-site expenses. As well, it affords my son's business to stay in this community. This small retail venture, in part, will help offset the cost of these farm improvements, without which we could not and likely would not have made these long-term financial commitments. I'm committed to continuing to improve our farm yields and revenues. In doing so, through the assistance the on-farm diversified use program provides, it becomes a win-win, in that we will improve the farm's land, create a growing yield, and returning the farm to viability, while at the same time teach our son how to operate a small business, providing trailers in part to our agricultural partners and community. In closing, I'd like to share that we appreciate the hard work that the Planning Committee has done in guiding us through this very detailed process, and thank you in advance for your support.
Thanks. Is there any questions of Mr. Grass? Councillor Seymour Fagan.
Through you. Thank you, Mr. Grass, for clarifying a few things. I have a question for you. Now, if we put a time limit on this and said, for 5 years, would that be amenable to you?
I'd rather not have a time limit put in place because I don't know how long it will take to grow beyond the 32 trailers of inventory that would be required in order to maintain, this new business. It might take 7 years. I don't know. So I'd rather not have a time limit imposed.
Okay, because I know that with some planning things, there's some restrictions and time limits. Now, had you looked for commercial property, so you weren't using agricultural property, had you looked for commercial property to have a trailer sale business?
Originally, we were hopeful that we could do it on the Highway 7 end of our property. That would be, more amenable to me and would also have the Highway 7 exposure. We currently have an agricultural entrance off that property, but MTO would not permit us to have a permanent entrance off that end of the property. So that was taken away. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it's going to be a small business. I'm teaching my son how to do what I've taught so many people to do over the years, and by doing it on our property, the inventory is secure. He doesn't have heavy lease expenses to incur, and it'll make it that much more viable and more viable quicker.
Is the business appointment only, or can anybody come anytime?
It will be by appointment on Saturday or Sunday. Other than that, it'll be 9 to 5, Monday to Friday.
Okay, and so people will they could come by and it'll be open?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions? Seeing none, can I have a motion to accept the deputation? Councillor O'Reilly, seconded by Mayor Latham. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. All right, that brings us to number 5, correspondence. And Joel, I'm assuming we've received no further correspondence for today's agenda. Thank you. Number 6, a regular and returned report. 6.1, Plan 2022-038, an application to amend the City of Kawartha Lakes official plan and the Emily zoning bylaw 1996-30 at 689 Cottingham Road, Omemee. Jonathan, you want to give us a quick rundown here?
Yes, good afternoon, Planning Advisory Committee. I would like to thank the folks coming forward to speak on the application earlier, the delegations. Also like to thank Kent Randall for coming out to represent his client as well. And Kent did a bulk of the heavy lifting as far as the application details go. I'm just going to share my screen here and walk you through a quick overview of it. So here is the site. This is 689 Cottingham Road in Emily Township. And here is a concept plan of the proposed on-farm diversified use. So back in January, we conducted our statutory public meeting on the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for this site to allow a trailer sales establishment as considered an on-farm diversified use. So from that meeting in January up until now, we are very happy to be bringing this back to the Planning Advisory Committee, as well as the applicant with a path forward. So since that public meeting, we completed our agency circulation and agency review, as well as received comments from neighbors, concerned residents about the proposal, which EcoView has graciously provided a response to, and that is included in as an appendix to the report. Through the agency circulation, I will discuss quickly the traffic impact study that I understand some delegates had questions or concerns about. As Kent said, that we had a third party review that traffic study that was submitted as part of this application. They accepted the numbers provided and did advise that through the site plan process that we look to have the applicant widen the access to the site just to allow for tractor trailer maneuvering into and out of the site. Other than that, the traffic counts and data provided was accepted by our peer reviewer. There will also be, during the site plan process related to the rail trail, we would be looking for some type of signage to be installed just to ideally mitigate conflict between trail users, vehicles, folks driving along Cottingham Road. For the purposes of the policy review, the big key for this particular application is that staff are supportive of considering this proposed use as an on-farm diversified use as defined under the PPS and further elaborated in the publication 851, which is essentially guidelines for what can be contemplated as an on-farm diversified use. I will note that important to note rather is that the portion of the property where the proposed use is located is considered rural under the official plan. It is not prime agricultural. That is important to note, as rural designated lands applying guidelines, considering and contemplating permitted uses, there is more flexibility given to rural lands. That is in publication A51, and that phrase is in there, and I do want to make that clear for folks listening. So that being said, staff still did utilize the evaluation of the criteria built out in publication A51. I know Kent alluded to them. There are 4 criteria, pardon me, 5. Number 1, that the use is located on a farm. That one was built out for us in correspondence. I believe the applicant this afternoon further provided some background on that. Number 2 is that the use is secondary to the principal agricultural use of the property. So that's kind of the high level summary of that point. How to measure the scale of the use, as Kent described, is temporally and spatially. So where is it on the site, and how much space is it taking up, as well as how long is it going to be occurring for? So based on the guidelines provided in that document, and the information provided on the concept plan, there is a very small amount of agricultural land that will be displaced for the purposes of the use. It is, I believe it's built out in the report, and it's a very minute amount that will not necessarily be permanently displaced either, pardon me. Once, or should the trailer sales use grow and the incubator period sort of, it grows past that and the use relocates, then that land can likely be restored to a productive agricultural use. There will be no grading or on-site drainage conducted as part of this use, or as part of the getting it set up, if you will, and the compatibility requirements regarding transportation and potential nuisances are maintained. The site where the development will be sited is something to be aware of in terms of eye lines and site. And then through the transportation lens of it, the traffic impact study details how this can work viably. Limited in area is the 3rd criteria that is prescribed by the said publication. And on-farm diversified uses may occupy no more than 2% of the property to a maximum of 1 hectare. So the subject property at 689 Cottingham is approximately 39.7 hectares. The use itself, that's the structure, the detached accessory structure, the agricultural storage shed. For that purpose, that's one and the same building. I understand there was some confusion around that with regards to the notice, as well as other communication sent out, but that's one and the same building. There are no new structures proposed as part of this official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment. So considering the footprint of the shed, of the storage, and the footprint of the outdoor storage, that gross area is well under the 2% of the property. It's actually closer to under 1% of the property. So from that perspective, this use can be contemplated as an on-farm diversified use. So number 4 goes to say that on-farm diversified uses are included but are not limited to home occupations, home industries, agritourism uses, and uses that produce value-added agricultural products. So the PPS, in my experience and in my opinion, is designed to allow some flexibility for what can be considered an on-farm diversified use, which is why the language was worded such that it is. This use is very much akin to what we consider a home occupation or a home business. There is outdoor storage component of it, but there is an office that is inside the detached accessory building. Home businesses and many of the current and effect zoning bylaws are permitted, and you may have an office that's not necessarily in the house. So from our perspective, from staff's perspective, it does meet that definition. Further to that, again, this is rural lands. These are rural lands where the proposed use is to be located. Considering that it's rural, there is a little more flexibility provided as to what can occur or be considered for the use of that area. Lastly, is be compatible with and not hinder surrounding agricultural operations. So through this review or this application, we did request that an agricultural impact brief and minimum distance separation criteria calculations be completed and submitted for review. The materials were submitted, they were reviewed, and they are acceptable to staff. So therefore, staff feel that this can be contemplated and considered as an on-farm diversified use. These uses are permitted through the provincial policy statement. There is language also pertaining to on-farm diversified uses in the where it comes to the growth plan in terms of uses that are adjacent to key hydrologic features and key natural heritage features, where this is not close to those natural heritage features. We've received our comments back from the Conservation Authority, and there is no concern with regards to those. So when it comes to the nuts and bolts of the amendment, staff are proposing to apply an agricultural exception zone to the site that would limit permitted uses. Aside from agricultural uses, we would limit the use to trailer sales and storage. There would be no commercial use, broad stroke brush applied to the whole property. The use of the property fundamentally is staying the same. We are proposing to insert, as you would have seen in the attachments to the bylaws of the report, a small area delineating the exception zone, and the proposed uses would remain in that location. If there was any, as well as agricultural uses could also occur in that area as well. It is important to note that it's not a commercial zone being applied. There's no further opportunity should the bylaw be passed for alternative commercial uses to occur on the site that don't align with that zoning. And lastly, we'll touch on a quick comment from one of the delegates earlier. When it comes to types of trailers, including types of trailers in the zoning bylaw, that type of detail when it comes to types of trailers is not something we typically get into, as it is very difficult to enforce types of trailers and how to monitor the stock or the inventory of any type of retail offering is very difficult to do. So generally from a high level, we keep trailer sales and storage a bit broader in terms of the definition. So all of that being said, pardon me, I'm just looking through my report. We would, staff, in consideration of the comments heard, we would respectfully ask that the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications be approved. The zoning bylaw amendment also includes a holding provision that would require the application, as Kent alluded to, go through site plan. That holding symbol would simply, make sure that does happen. Through the site plan, we would look to address any potential zoning concerns with regards to setbacks, dimensions of parking spaces, access. Those types of things would be worked through or resolved through the site plan process. And that is my presentation on this application. I'm open to any questions from the Planning Advisory Committee.
Thanks, Jonathan. I think you're going to have some questions here. Councillor Seymour Fagan.
Thank you, and through you. Hi, Jonathan. So I have a couple questions because I have some issues with the diversified uses. The other thing, actually, that I kind of want to state at one point, planning was all about keeping commercial within commercial, residential within residential, and agriculture within agriculture. And, you know, now it's mixing things up, and it seems to be disturbing the areas that surround this, especially if we're bringing in, you know, something that really doesn't have to do with agriculture into an agriculture community. I understand about, you know, entrepreneurship and business. I am one myself, but I think this causes conflict. And when did the government put in this policy? Because I remember other businesses coming forward that actually wanted to do farm tours and couldn't do them.
Believe that, through the chair. So first off, with regards to the timeline, it's been in place for a couple of years. The on-farm diversified uses provisions, and I believe it was 2014. Someone correct me if my date is wrong, but it's been not necessarily as, let's say, as maybe as popular in the municipality as it has been in, you know, recently. But when it comes to considering what is an on-farm diversified use, like I described in my presentation, there are criteria for evaluating on-farm diversified uses, and the intent of those criteria are to ensure that a proposed use is not blatantly offensive or necessarily inappropriate for the location and where it's located. What can be considered an on-farm diversified use, in my opinion, is purposely a little bit, not vague, but it is intended to be flexible to allow bona fide farmers to supplement their income with some other type of service or other type of offering, other type of goods producing. Pardon me. When it comes to the prime agricultural versus rural designation, the prime agricultural policies for surrounding OFDUs, I'll just refer to them as OFDUs. It's a bit easier on the tongue. They are more rigid, and I would say look through at more of a closer lens, and that criteria is further built out in the PPS in Publication 851. With rural lands, it is a little more flexible, but staff still evaluated the proposed use, even though it is on rural lands, using the same criteria to determine its suitability for the site. Can any use be considered an OFDU, provided that it meets the criteria prescribed, applicable, you know, planning policies, whether it's the PPS or the growth plan or a city's official plan? There is merit to entertaining applications for such uses, absolutely. Then, you know, should a zoning bylaw amendment be required after that, then that would be on a case-by-case basis. Did I miss anything in your question?
No, thank you. You answered it all and more. Thank you very much. One more question,
Okay,
because
no problem.
I've asked about this before. So commercial taxes, commercial mill rate are much higher than rural or residential or agriculture. So how would they be taxed?
Through the chair, that's an excellent question, and I do not know the answer to that one off the top of my head. I know Director Hawley is in chambers with you folks. Perhaps he may know, but I do not know the answer to that one, and I would have to come back to provide a response.
Sorry, through the chair to the councillor. MPAC will assess them higher on the basis of their zoning that allows for an agriculturally related use. Their taxes will go up by a certain amount, similar to other on-farm diversified uses that have come before you. But that will be based on the amount of area as well as what they can do. Given that they aren't constructing any more dwellings or any more buildings, the taxation rate will increase, but it won't be as high.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was wondering, because as we all know, we get our money to pay for things from tax rates, and commercial are much higher than agriculture. Okay, thank you very much.
Wayne, go ahead.
Through the chair to Jonathan, what happens in a couple of years or whatever, maybe 3 years, if the business hasn't succeeded and it fails and collapses? Are they allowed to start up any other business they want, or does it go back to the original zoning?
Through the chair, so should the business not succeed, this is a zoning bylaw amendment, so it stays with the land until such a time where a Planning Act application to either amend or repeal said zoning comes forward. So as I explained in the terms of the nuts and bolts of the amendment, it is not introducing any other types of commercial uses outside of the trailer sales and storage, what is outlined in the report. So could they, should trailer sales not work out, can they start selling guitars and drum sets? I say that because I'm a musician. No, it wouldn't be considered under that bylaw. Musical retail, retail in general, outside of trailer sales and storage, is not something that would be permitted as of right, should the bylaw be approved. Any type of, straying from that would require an amendment.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor O'Reilly?
Yes, just a couple of questions and a couple of comments. First of all, I think the thing to keep in mind is that this, as the staff report indicated, this is rural agricultural land. It's not prime agricultural land. And I think, and the remaining property is going to be kept in agricultural land. I'd like to remind people that on agricultural land, on this property, if you are concerned about a half acre that they're using, you could have a feed lot, you could have a riding stable with big trucks and all kinds of trailers, and you could also have a corn dryer. Put up big tractor trailers that would come in, and we're a number of corn dryers around the area that have tractor trailers. So I'm just saying, on prime agricultural land, and I'm sure it was allowed in the day, but which I'm sure Emily didn't break any of the rules, but I would suggest that probably 30 homes built there, a lot of them were on prime agricultural land. And I'm sure it was allowed in the day at the time. And and I think one of the number of concerns I talked to some of the people was the traffic study, and it does seem like light numbers, but it appears though the traffic study was peer reviewed. Not only did they have a traffic study, but it was, I think it was announced that it was peer reviewed as well. And I think maybe it was Darlene mentioned she talked to Ernie Hardeman. It was interesting because I had a conversation with Ernie Hardeman about 5 years ago when, it's actually where the casino is down there, and they were looking to get a new concept going in there, and it turned out that Ernie Hardeman said in the meeting to the Mr. McFadden, the Reeves, that no, we wouldn't be allowing it because it's prime agricultural land. Since then, as we talked about the bylaws that have changed the laws of the province, since then they just received an MZO. They're going to put an entertainment center. That's all gone by the wayside, and a number of homes and entertainment centers. So my point is that, first of all, that the laws have changed in the province with the government's re-elected, and they're going to allow a number of these occupations on property that is more agricultural. So, and I can appreciate the fact that the neighbors do have a lot of concerns, but I think when you talk about time and scale, we're talking about a half an acre. And anyways, Al Robinson certainly does have a larger operation up there with more trailers, and there certainly is going to be more traffic. But I think Jonathan, in my opinion, has answered a lot of the questions in a justification of the report. But because I know a lot of people I've talked to had a lot of similar concerns, as well as the deputies here today.
Any further questions of Jonathan from committee? Okay, I've got a couple, Jonathan. And just because I can't remember seeing it or looking at it right. So if I was to open up a trailer sales business, if it was like in the middle of Lindsay, what zoning would I need? I know automotive, I need C2.
Yeah, I mean the specific zone category, I couldn't tell you. If you give me a few seconds, I could find it. But it would be generally a commercial type of commercial zoning, potentially even an industrial one, depending on what the provisions indicate. Bear with me 1 second. This is not something I was expecting, so thanks for the challenge.
Apparently, I am challenging this week.
I'm just gonna mute myself here while I.
Okay, it's okay, Jonathan. I'm just what's going through my head, right? Is I do struggle with this, right? Like I get the on-farm diversified use, and I am a supporter of on-farm diversified use, but at the same point, I'm just wondering where that line in the sand is, right? Like. I like if I wanted to start a trailer business, then why would I go out and buy a retail commercial piece of property if I could do it on my own farm, right? Or why aren't I selling used cars off of my farm on 35 instead of having a used car dealership in Lindsay, right? I'm struggling with where that line is and where potentially we can end up. I get the whole volume thing, right? Like inventory has nothing to do with sales volume, really. And anybody that's worked in a retail business can tell you the same. It just means you're replenishing your inventory on a more regular basis. I know lots of dealers that inventory 1,000 units and don't sell as much as somebody that inventories 500, right? But
through the chair, looks like a general commercial zone would contemplate that type of use. The thing with whether it's in Lindsay, to kind of use a actually good comparison. In Lindsay is completely a site plan control area as well. So we would all, any type of new development, whether it's a trailer sales or storage use, would have to go through the site plan process as well. And through that we would be looking to, mitigate any concerns with respect to screening or nuisances or traffic concerns in that regard, because through the site plan process we can request those things, and the site plan process is also something that the Cottingham application is going through. With regards to where's the line, I think that's a fabulous question, and it is something that it does warrant further review, whether it's at the municipal level, at the provincial level, to build out further parameters on what can or cannot be considered on-farm diversified use, and balancing the interests of farmers with their neighboring community members who may not be farming, may not be farmers. We've certainly seen, as a municipality is concerned, a number of these applications coming forward, and they are quite diverse in what the use is. So where's that line? I don't know. Maybe we're still looking for it. If you find it and want to share it with staff, that'd be something we'd appreciate.
Okay, thanks. Richard might not want me to tell him where the line is, but any further questions of Jonathan? Okay, seeing none. Committee, there's a recommendation before you. What are your wishes, Mayor Letham?
I'll give you a motion, and if Gonna somebody second it, I'd like to speak to it. That report plan 2022-038, City of Kawartha Lakes official plan amendment and Township of Emily zoning bylaw amendment for 689 Cottingham Road, geographic Township of Emily, be received for information, and that an official plan amendment respecting application D012-2020-009 substantially in the form attached as Appendix D to report plan 2022-038 be denied.
Is there a seconder for Mayor Letham's motion? Councillor Seymour Fagan, would you like to speak to it?
I would. I have to admit I'm struggling with this one, and for a lot of different reasons that we've heard from here today. I'm not gonna, the wishy-washy definition of on-farm diversified use, I believe it's there, and we have to deal with it. So I don't, this is not based on that. I don't believe it fits into that category. I read the report and, the OMAFRA and the provincial policy statement, and I think staff have done a great job with the criteria as far as it fits within the criteria that they're obligated to look at. And I'm a huge fan of business. I'm a huge fan of, trying to help our farmers who are not always struggling, but some of our farmers who use this on-farm diversified use to bring in some extra income, to keep farm operations moving forward. Where I'm struggling, and I think our role as a council and even as a committee here today, is just, I'm looking at it and going, I don't think this particular application is a good fit for this area. Where it happens to be located, there are concerns. I think they're legitimate concerns. I do not believe anybody is against, a farmer or somebody trying to have a diversified use or what goes on in their area. I don't think this is one of those, don't want it looking across the street. I honestly believe it's just, this is a good application, I think, that makes sense. It just, to me, and this is personal for me, it doesn't make sense for this area. If this was another concession over on a different road, on a quieter area, I would support it 100% because it meets the criteria. I just think this, right now, where it is in this area, is not a good fit, and that's my rationale for suggesting we deny the application.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Councillor O'Reilly?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll speak in opposition to the motion. I feel as though that planning has reviewed this thoroughly. I think Jonathan gives 6 good reasons why this does fit in this area, and I know that as the mayor has said, and as many of the deputies are here, this doesn't in many ways seem like a perfect fit because it is agricultural land, and as I mentioned, there are 30 homes out there as well. But for the test of planning, in my opinion, this passes the test. That's why we hire professional planners for, and doesn't mean we all have to agree with them, but in their opinion, both with Jonathan, I think and I had some speaking with Richard Hawley as well, staff is in support of this application, and whether it's on this road or a road down the road, and because there's already lots of traffic out there as well, coming with the trail as well, but I think we're trying to, the government of the day has made an opportunity for farmers to stay on their farm and get some added revenue to the farm, and I think this does fit the criteria, and that's why I speak in opposition to it.
Councillor Seymour Fagan?
Yes, I'd like to speak in support of this motion. I've been very vocal in regards to on-farm diversification because we've had things come forward in front of this committee before that actually have nothing to do with farming. And the neighbors are upset who are active farmers. We don't have enough farmland as it is, and it's getting smaller and smaller. And I do feel that we need to protect our farmland and protect our farmers as well. So I thank the mayor for proposing this motion.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, or Wayne, go ahead.
I would like to see a compromise where we approve this motion, but for a time-limited period of maybe 5 years, because there's too many unknowns as to whether this is going to succeed or whether there's going to be 20 vehicles a day or 2 vehicles a day, and I'd like to see a time period where it could be resolved before it's approved permanently.
Are you offering that as a friendly to the mover?
Yes.
Does the mover see that as friendly? No, he does not. Any further discussion? Councillor O'Reilly?
There's lots been said around here about the farming operation, try and save it. I just saying that personally, I've been a lifelong farmer my whole life, and as we said, there's lots of struggles, as was mentioned out here today, and I think any way that I see it as an asset to keep people on their farm, not to hinder it, and I see that that this certainly would be an asset rather than trying to hinder, try and keep farmers away.
Thank you. Would you like to sum up, Mr. Mayor Latham?
Mr. Mayor Latham, thank you. Yeah, I don't disagree with Councillor Riley and the comments. I really don't. I mean, it does meet the criteria, and that's why I'm struggling with it, because you know, most days I would be supportive of this, and I can't argue the doesn't fit the on-farm diversified use, or that we shouldn't be supporting on-farm diversified use, because you know, that's a provincial policy, and it's there, and people are allowed to use it and to apply for it. I'll go back to my original argument that I don't believe this is a good fit for this area, and I believe on top of everything that makes sense in this report on why it meets the criteria from a planning perspective, that, you know, our job as council and committee is also to look at, you know, is it a good fit for the community? And I don't believe it is right now. So I'll stick with that argument. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to call the question. That was a sum up. Sorry, Jason. Calling the question. All in favor? Okay. That motion carries. 6.2, Plan 2022-039, an application to amend the City of Kawartha Lakes official plan and the Manvers zoning bylaw 87-06 at 344 Old Mill Road. Mark LaHaye, you want to give us a quick rundown, Mark?
Yes, good afternoon, members of Planning Advisory Committee. Notice for these applications for the official plan and zoning amendment were originally given to each assessed landowner within 500 meters and all applicable agencies, and a sign was posted in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act. Public meetings were held December 7th, 2016, and a second public meeting on September 11th, 2019. And further to the statutory meetings, the owner applicant hosted an open house on site on November 9th, 2019. The subject property is located on the east side of Old Mill Road, north of Pigeon Creek Road, and consists of approximately 40.5 hectares of land. It's located within a rural area. And the effect of these applications is to permit a religious educational center, which includes accommodation, multi-purpose rooms for meditation and yoga, and a dining area. And the site will also include a place of worship as part of a phased development of the land as a limited scale retreat for the Rinpoche Buddhist community. The latest modified proposal that was submitted in August 2021 for consideration contemplates the proposed development in 3 phases. And that includes, in the August submission, an 1,145 square meter educational center with 15 rooms for accommodation, and also contemplates 6 private cabins to be recognized for sleeping accommodation and 7 rooms for accommodation in the proposed temple. The size of the education center and temple previously advertised through the second public meeting and that is evaluated in this report, however, remain unchanged from the 550 square meters and 360 square meters respectively. In terms of phasing, the first phase would consist of construction of a new main septic system and parking area while utilizing the existing farmhouse, garage, and accessory dwelling unit, and 6 private sleeping cabins to be used for overnight accommodation. The second phase would consist of construction of the educational center, and the concept plan that was submitted and introduced during the second public meeting included a smaller religious education center with a total floor area of 550 square meters, which is roughly half the size of the original 1,145 square meter single-story proposal that was presented at the public meeting and circulated in 2016. The difference is that there's fewer accommodation rooms through the second public meeting, went from down to 15 from 25, and that main building will be located adjacent to Old Mill Road to the north of the existing buildings on site. The third phase consists of a temple with a total floor area of 363 square meters, which is on the hill, generally north of the and east of the educational center. And the application made reference to the floor area and gross floor area of the temple as being the same. There would be an internal gravel road that would be constructed from the educational center to the temple, and that temple would also include washroom facilities, 7 accommodation rooms, and would be serviced by separate services. There would be limited parking that would be also available at that temple site. The religious education center and place of worship buildings, as mentioned, will be privately serviced by well and individual septic. The balance of the land would be used for agricultural pursuits. The concept plan that was introduced in 2019 for the 2019 proposal that was considered at the second public meeting is outlined in Appendix B for the concept plan that's dated January 2019. That was submitted in support of the application, and subsequently revised concept plans have been submitted, one of which was included with the summary response that was prepared by the applicant in relation to the open house that was hosted by Rocher Society in November 2019. And there was a further revised concept plan that was submitted in August of 2021. Other revised plans and documents that were submitted by the applicant in support of the proposed amendments, including addendum traffic letters, takes into account anticipated numbers of participants and their method of travel, a geotechnical test pit investigation, which provides recommendations for the proposed site entrance and for upgrading the road for the proposed use. And there were revised functional stormwater management reports and functional servicing reports as well. The proposed zoning amendment addresses specific uses along with the size of buildings and the maximum numbers of accommodation rooms. The proposed temple will serve retreat attendees, and final occupancy numbers will be determined at the site plan stage where occupancy limits would be posted. In order to address planning, engineering, and building comments, the proposed zoning bylaw amendment has been structured to contain holding provisions to ensure the orderly phasing of the development, and includes requirements for the approval of a road design, as well as improvements, entrance design and location, municipal turnaround and cost estimates, and the completion of required upgrades, along with a peer review of the hydrogeological study, and servicing design and establishment of occupancies. And finally, entering into a site plan agreement and amending agreement through each phase. As you're probably already aware, in addition to the comments made by the delegates, we received comments from a neighbor, Paul and Diane McCourt, indicating concern with the condition and suitability of the roadway leading to the subject property and its ability to handle traffic generated by the proposal, as well as potential increases in traffic from visitors from another temple in the area. Speaking to the specific bylaw amendments that have been proposed by EcoView Consulting, we note they are requesting amendments to the total floor area of the temple, as well as the proposed educational center. The numbers that we have provided in our zoning bylaw reflect the information that we had available at the time, and that was considered through the second public meeting process. The changes that are recommended to the non-permitted uses, which include not permitting a wedding facility or wedding events, and the hosting of outside events, which was amended to also include not associated with retreat-based use, would be deemed to be acceptable. So further to that, we would indicate that the appropriate background studies have been submitted to support the applications for the official plan and zoning bylaw amendments. And the reports and background studies have been circulated to the appropriate agencies and their city departments for review. And these applications for official plan and zoning bylaw amendment demonstrate consistency with the provincial policy statement and conformity to the growth plan and official plan as amended. The proposed applications, along with the requirement for specific conditions to remove the holding symbols on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, together with site plan approval, which through the site plan approval process would also include potential for performance securities and the like. This will appropriately facilitate the orderly and phased development of proposed uses on such property. And in consideration of that and the comments in the report, we're recommending that the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications be referred to council. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mark. Any questions of committee of Mark at this point? Councillor Seymour Fagan.
Thank you, and through you. Hi, Mark. I have a couple questions. So we were told that the occupancy would be 30, but that was with the numbers that you had prior to the amendments that they're requesting. Is that correct?
Yeah, so my understanding based on the servicing requirements and design for the site, that maximum occupancy could be approximately 40. And that would be based on the servicing that would be available.
Okay, thank you. And with all these amendments, were you not aware of the request that they had asked? Because all of a sudden they're coming at the 11th hour with amendments.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, we did look at the evolution of the concept plans that were provided to us through further submissions, but these were outside of the public meeting process. Notwithstanding that the owner applicant did host their own open house on November of 2019 and did provide some additional information to those attendees with respect to the proposed floor plans and or the building elevations, which did include a second level. That was not contemplated through the second public meeting process that we went through. That was based, we have based our zoning bylaw amendment on the information that we had available at that time.
Thank you very much. So there has been no public process on these amendments. The other thing I was wondering, because it was mentioned that if we didn't approve this with the amendments, that they will come back and basically apply to double its size through minor variance. Is that correct?
So my understanding through the chair is that their minor variance is a planning act process. However, through the a site-specific zoning bylaw amendment, I understand there's a moratorium on essentially applying for a minor variance within 2 years of a site-specific zoning bylaw, unless there's been a specific council resolution to address that.
Okay, thank you. And just one more, a quick one, because they keep mentioning a corduroy road and the fact that KRCA did not let the municipality brush and ditch that area because it is protected. Do you know anything about this with the KRCA?
Through the chair, I'm not specifically knowledgeable of the process through the KRCA in terms of any road works that it would be done on a city maintained road.
Okay, thank you. I guess the concern would be because these buildings will be made of, I would assume, concrete, that there'll be heavy equipment coming up there, essentially on a road that does not normally take that kind of equipment.
Yeah, my understanding is the road improvements that have been recommended through their geotechnical report relate to improvements generally in front of their property that would need to meet certain engineering and design requirements for a particular rural cross section that the city would accept.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any further questions? Councillor O'Reilly?
Yeah, thanks very much. Maybe either to Mark or to Richard, on the issue of the road, is this something to be dealt with at the planning? I realize there can be a hold put on it to address them, but is this engineering or is this something to be addressed through this application?
Through the chair to Councillor O'Reilly. It is appropriate to look at it through the site plan approval stage. They're going to be going through a detailed design, and prior to the removal of holding, that road has to be reviewed, and we're going to be looking at the whole phasing of upgrades. Excuse me. So what is needed for all the different phases? So the road upgrades will be implemented through the site plan approval for each phase. So there's 3 holding symbols. And each holding symbol will have certain road upgrades that will be attributed to that phase based on the load of the road that will be anticipated through the additional uses that the phase will allow, essentially. That's how we have structured this.
And further to that, who would be paying for that? The municipality, or would it be the applicant, or a combination of both there?
That would be the applicant's responsibility to pay for road upgrades that are related to the development. So we would be securing those upgrades through the site plan agreement. And once those upgrades are done, then the securities would be released back to the applicant.
Wayne, go ahead.
Through the chair to Richard, but what if the Conservation Authority will not allow those upgrades? Then where are we?
Through the chair to Member Brumwell. That's something that I've been sending some emails on right now, just to sort of see what this was, what KRCA didn't allow us to do. I haven't gotten an answer back, but obviously any sort of road upgrades that are needed would have to go through KRCA's approval as well.
Any further questions? Mayor Letham?
Yeah, I maybe, as chair of Kawartha Conservation, maybe I can help with that. Traditionally, you would apply for a permit in a wetland area, and because it's a wetland or a protected area, there would be a higher criteria that would need to be done to allow for work to be done in that area. So a road through a normal area would be easier to put in, less cost to put in. So there might be all sorts of mitigating measures that Kawartha Conservation would require to upgrade that road. But usually there's a way to do it. It's just, they have to do it to protect the environment and the wetland that it's in. So there's already a road there. So you can't say, well, a road can't go through there. It's just as they upgrade that road, there'll be certain criteria that have to be met. I don't know what they are, but usually there's a path forward there. It's just a question of how far do they need to go to be protection for the environment. So I don't know if that helps. Usually there's a way to get there.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing none, there's a recommendation before you. Councillor Seymour Fagan.
With the recommendation, I actually, can I have a recommendation here? That I'd like to send it back to staff for them to look at the amendments and to hold a public meeting. This is not public process. all of a sudden these amendments come forward, and a private meeting was held, but I think it's time, you know, if we're going to do this, let's do it properly so it doesn't come back on us.
Okay, so just for clarity, your motion is to refer the file back to staff for further review and public consultation, right? Okay, is there a seconder for Councillor Seymour Fagan's motion? Sorry, go ahead,
Sorry,
Richard.
through the chair. Could I just ask clarification on what you're looking for? Are you looking for a public meeting on the additional floor space that's been proposed by EcoView today, or because we've already had a public meeting, are you looking for a public meeting for the additional floor space then?
For the additional floor space, because it essentially doubles it, and they said if it, you know, they would like it passed now, and if not, they'll come for a minor variance. So I think it's only fair that the public are aware of what actually is in the plan.
Okay, that's good, Richard. You're clear with that? Okay. Is there a seconder for the motion?
Just for a clarification on that. So was it not mentioned by the deputant that they could actually go with the original one? That they were okay with the original one when this was an add-on, and they were okay with, just for clarification to Richard. Clarification, yeah.
Okay, let's get a seconder for this motion, and then we can have some discussion. Is there a seconder for the motion? It's on the floor. Okay, I see none, so that motion fails. Mayor Latham?
Yeah, I'll give you, I want to put the motion as printed, and I'm happy to read it, and I will speak to it, but I'm not sure, how do I amend this motion? Maybe a question to Richard. I would like to see it put forward with the original bylaw and the single story that they've offered to do. I think that's a better path, and then let them come forward. The Committee of Adjustment is a public process, so if somebody objects to the second floor, they can do it at that point. But let's put this forward at the original bylaw, which was the single story, the original before the amendment. So how would I adjust the wording to include that in this? Good question, eh?
Through the chair to the mayor, those numbers are in the bylaw. It's being proposed by staff today. So we are proposing the 550 square meters for the education center, single story, and a single story temple at 363 square meters, which is what we had the last public meeting for.
So this motion as printed with the bylaw that's attached is for the single story, the original proposal.
That's correct.
Okay. Then I'll give you a motion that report plan 2022-039 respecting part lot 21, concession 13, geographic township of Manvers, identified as 344 Old Mill Road, Rewoshe Society, applications D01-16-007 and D06-16035 be received, that a bylaw to implement official plan amendment application D01-16-007 substantially in the form attached as Appendix C to report plan 2022-039 be approved and adopted by council, that a bylaw to implement zoning bylaw amendment application D06-16-035 substantially in the form attached as Appendix D to report plan 2022-039 be approved and adopted by council, that in accordance with section 34(17) of the Planning Act, council having considered the changes to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment deems no further public notice necessary, the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute any documents and agreements required by the approval of these applications.
Okay, seconder for the motion, Jason Willock. You want to speak to it, Mayor Latham?
I do. I know there's been some concerns raised. I'm personally satisfied that the holding symbols that are put on it will, with the site plan, will offer some controls moving forward. We've got clarification that the road needs to be upgraded with the proper permits from Kawartha Conservation. We've got clarification who's going to pay for that as it moves forward. They've had 2 public meetings. They had an open house. It wasn't a private meeting at the open house. It was open to anybody who wanted to come. You know, I think they've been very upfront with what it is they want to do. A lot of people are pushing back, you know, with scenarios that could happen, might happen. in their opinion, will happen. And I think, I just think this is a good project that is a benefit to the community. It's not a big project, and I think we've got enough controls on it that we can meet most of the concerns from people in the area. And I think we've asked these people have been very patient and worked very hard and spent a lot of money to move this forward. I think they have great intentions, and I'm happy to move that recommendation.
Okay, any discussion? Councillor Seymour Fagan?
I'm just going to speak against it because of the fact that we just see all the amendments right now. I know that they're going to come forward in a minor variance application, but they have known for years that this is what they wanted. So I'm not quite sure why it wasn't included now and why it wasn't part of the public process, because this is what it's supposed to be about, a public process. So thank you.
Councillor O'Reilly?
Maybe through to you to Richard. Do you feel as though that we can? I know it's in the application. And I know it's in the recommendation that these concerns can be adequately addressed. The ones we addressed in this process.
Through the chair to the councillor, yes. I mean, based on the sizes that we're recommending approval of, we feel that the concerns have been addressed. It's outlined specifically in the holding symbol how they will be addressed and at what stage they will be addressed. So essentially, the road design will be as part of phase 1, and that will be phased in as required. Servicing will be all addressed at the front end, and the servicing will then be phased in as required. And the peer review of the hydrogeological report will all be done at the first phase. So there's a lot of things that will be done at the first phase before they can even proceed on to development. So we want to make sure that we have everything nailed down so that we know what we're implementing at what phase. So we feel that the issues can be addressed through the holding provisions adequately.
Councillor Seymour Fagan?
I have a question because, okay, say we allow this to go through and then KRCA says, no, you can't change the road. And then, they can't get the heavy trucks up there. Are we at all open to any liability or anything because we've approved it?
Through the chair to the councillor, I can't give you any advice on legal liability. That's something that we would have to discuss with KRCA, but I'm sure that there will be something that will likely be allowed to go ahead. I've never known KRCA to block a road project per se. So, but I mean that's something that we'll have to talk to KRCA about.
Okay, thank you.
Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, just a comment. I just think with 3 holding cells, it's almost kind of onerous, and if they go through that kind of hoops to make this work, I believe it's going to be a good, solid project.
Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, calling the question. All in favor? That passes. Thank you. Item 6.3, ENG 2022-019, Assumption of Port 32 Subdivision, Phase 4. Bob Cajun, yes, sorry. I'm just pushing ahead here, but yeah, we will take a 5-minute break and use the washroom, and anybody that wishes to sneak out can. Sorry, Christina, I really tried to get through this. All good, Kathy? We're all good, Christina. The floor is yours. 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Let's try for 2, shall we? So I'm here before you today, this afternoon, to respectfully request for the assumption to proceed for the 4th phase of the Port 32 subdivision in Bobcaygeon. This is specific to South Harbor Drive, and it was registered in 1990. In working with the developer over the last number of years, it was imperative that we encourage the placement of the top course of asphalt in an effort to proceed to maintenance and then ultimately proceed to assumption. And I'm happy to report that after the top course was placed in 2020 and some deficiencies have been corrected, we've done the inspection, gone through the necessary maintenance, consultation with our partners within Public Works, etc. And we're pleased to present to you today the bylaw substantially in the form of for this particular assumption. I'm open to any questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Christina. Any questions? Councillor Seymour Fagan, go ahead.
It's not really a question. Yeah, Andy just said it. Yeah, thank you very much. This has been a long time coming, and they are very vocal. So we really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, you've got a recommendation before you. Is there a motion?
Or let Kathleen do it.
As printed, Councillor Seymour Fagan, seconded by Councillor O'Reilly. Any discussion? Calling the question, all in favor? Carries. Thank you. 6.4, ENG 2022-020, pre-servicing of subdivision lands, policy number CP 2018-009, updates and recommendations. Christina.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, to the committee, these are some considerations that we would like to have before you today, and they are as a result of our implementation of pre-servicing agreements over the last number of years since the update in 2018. Specifically, what we have found is that a lot of the subdivisions have either embedded within them a piece of road allowance and or are adjacent to road allowance, as a recently draft plan approved for Arizona Heights Phase 2, the Elm developments in Bobcaygeon as well. And what we're finding is, in order for us to be able to consider pre-servicing as a financial incentive to these developers, a time incentive as well, we feel that we need to continue with the practice with further enforced by the policy with respect to the security amount. So we're looking at the 100% security requirements there. Also, in keeping with some of the changes that have been occurring with respect to our transfer review with the Ministry of Environment, we wanted to just ensure that those requirements for the Form 1, for the environmental compliance approval, et cetera, were embedded in this document. And also further to some of these projects proceeding to pre-servicing, it's been identified by Planning Division that indeed we need to ensure that the zoning is in place in order to support the previously required or allowed permitted model homes or pre-construction homes. So these are some of the amendments that we've made. They're primarily textual in terms of the clarity of language. We also had some additional insurance language that has come through the craft agreement, most recently in the subdivision agreement. So that's been provided by risk management. And so we thought it was prudent to have the exact same types of insurance required. And again, pre-servicing of lands is the placement of infrastructure that will eventually be assumed by the municipality. But at the time that it's being placed, it's typically placed only on private property. And as I say, some of these amendments are being suggested, or revisions are being suggested, to accommodate some servicing taking place on our lands, the municipality's lands. And we have the policy changes in here with changes, and also we've gone to the next step of providing a template. And that template is, there's a template currently on our website, so we would be looking to have this updated template once approved by yourselves and potentially by council. Hopefully we would have that then put on the website as soon as possible. I'm open to any questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Christina. Any questions of Christina on this report? Seeing none, it looks like you've covered everything. You've got a recommendation before you. What would the committee like to do? Wayne, go ahead.
I'd like to make the motion as printed.
All right, motion is printed that pre-servicing of subdivision lands policy number CP 2018-009 updates and that report engineering 2022-020 pre-servicing of subdivision lands policy number CP 2018-009 updates and recommendations be received, that the proposed updates and current policies substantially in the form attached as Appendix A to report ENG 2022-020 be approved by council, renumbered and placed in the policy manual in the new city format, that the proposed template and the pre-servicing agreement substantially in the form attached as Appendix B be approved by council, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute any documents and agreements required by the approval of this application. Is there a seconder? Councillor O'Reilly, any discussion? Calling the question, all in favor? Carries. Thank you. Last motion of the day. Who would like to make it? Mayor Latham, motion for adjournment. Seconder, Councillor Seymour Fagan, all in favor? That carries. Thanks very much.